My brothers and sisters, there is a quiet lesson life teaches us often not with words, but with experiences. A lesson that many of us learn late, sometimes after heartbreak, sometimes after deep disappointment. And that lesson is this: not everyone who smiles with you is walking with you, and not everyone who stands near you truly stands for you. You may notice that when things are going well, when you are strong, successful, helpful, or needed, the circle around you seems full. Voices are loud, laughter is shared, and support feels abundant. But the moment your strength weakens, the moment you no longer have something to offer, the moment you need rather than give, silence begins to speak. And this reality can hurt because we are emotional beings. We assume closeness means loyalty and presence means sincerity. But life gently reminds us that many relationships are built on benefit, not brotherhood, on convenience, not compassion. This realization is not meant to make us angry, nor to harden our hearts. It is meant to awaken us, to teach us where to place our trust, where to invest our expectations, and where to seek true companionship. Because when you understand that not everyone is meant to stay, you stop begging for seats at tables where you were only invited for what you could bring. And in that understanding, there is peace. Human relationships are often conditional, shaped by benefit rather than sincerity, and this is a reality that quietly unfolds as we move through life. Most people do not wake up intending to be insincere or transactional. Yet the nature of human interaction is deeply influenced by need, convenience, and personal interest. From a young age, we are taught to value connection, companionship, and belonging. So we naturally assume that bonds are built purely on care, loyalty. However, as responsibilities increase and life becomes more demanding, relationships often begin to revolve around what is gained rather than what is shared from the heart. When someone is useful, they become visible. Their phone rings more often. Their presence is appreciated. Their opinions are sought. They are invited, remembered, and praised. But this attention is frequently tied not to who they are, but what they provide: support, resources, influence, time, or solutions. The moment that usefulness fades, even temporarily, the dynamic shifts. Conversations become shorter, invitations slow down, and concern grows distant. This change can feel sudden, but in reality, the foundation was fragile all along. Conditional relationships are not always malicious. Many people are unaware of how deeply they operate on self-interest. They gravitate toward those who make their lives easier, brighter, or more successful. And when that ease disappears, discomfort replaces closeness. Instead of adjusting with patience, they withdraw. This is not always because they wish harm, but because they never learned how to stay when benefit is replaced by burden. In this sense, conditional relationships reflect emotional immaturity rather than cruelty. Another reason these relationships form is fear. People fear scarcity, loneliness, and struggle. So they attach themselves to strength and stability. Being close to someone who is capable provides a sense of security. When that security is threatened, they instinctively look elsewhere. This instinct may be human, but it reveals how shallow some connections truly are. Sincerity requires courage, the courage to stay when there is nothing to gain, and the courage to give when it costs something. Many individuals confuse proximity with loyalty. Just because someone is always around during good times does not mean they are committed to you as a person. They may simply be committed to the comfort your presence brings. True sincerity shows itself not in celebration, but in inconvenience. It appears when you can no longer help, entertain, or uplift, yet someone still chooses to stand by you. That kind of presence is rare. And because it is rare, it is valuable. Conditional relationships also thrive in cultures that reward performance over character. People are praised for achievement, status, and productivity, while inner values are quietly overlooked. In such environments, relationships naturally become exchanges. As long as you perform, you are accepted. When you pause, struggle, or fail, your worth is questioned. Over time, this teaches people to tie their identity to usefulness, which can be deeply damaging. A person begins to believe they are only lovable when they are needed. This belief leads to exhaustion. When someone constantly feels the need to prove their value, they give beyond their capacity. They say yes when they should rest, they help when they are empty, and they remain available even when they are hurting. All of this is done in the hope that relationships will remain intact. But conditional relationships do not deepen with sacrifice. They simply take more. The moment the giving stops, the connection weakens, revealing that sincerity was never the foundation. It is important to understand this reality, not to become bitter, but to become aware. Awareness allows a person to recalibrate expectations. When you stop assuming that everyone's presence equals genuine care, you protect your heart without closing it. You learn to appreciate people for what they are capable of giving, while recognizing their limits. This understanding helps prevent disappointment from turning into resentment. Sincerity in relationships is not loud. It does not constantly announce itself or demand recognition. It is quiet, consistent, and patient. It remains when circumstances change. Conditional relationships, on the other hand, are often intense at the beginning and absent at the first sign of difficulty. They feel warm but lack depth. Recognizing the difference takes time and experience, and most people only learn it after being hurt. There is also wisdom in realizing that not everyone is meant to be close. Some people are companions for a season, others for a purpose, and a few for a lifetime. Expecting lifetime sincerity from every connection is unrealistic and unfair. When expectations exceed reality, disappointment is inevitable. But when expectations are aligned with human nature, peace follows. Understanding that many relationships are shaped by benefit rather than sincerity helps a person redirect their sense of worth. Instead of seeking validation from people, they begin to ground themselves internally. They stop measuring their value by how needed they are and start recognizing their inherent worth. This shift is freeing. It allows relationships to become healthier because they are no longer fueled by fear of abandonment or the pressure to perform. When sincerity does appear, it stands out clearly. It feels calm, not anxious. It feels safe, not demanding. It does not disappear when circumstances change. And because you understand how rare it is, you cherish it without clinging. You give without losing yourself, and you receive without suspicion, learning to navigate the world with both openness and discernment, knowing that while many connections are conditional, a few are sincere, and those few are more than enough. Usefulness has a strange magnetism. When a person is capable, resourceful, emotionally strong, financially stable, or socially influential, people naturally gather around them. Their presence feels beneficial, their words carry weight, and their time seems valuable. This attraction is not always rooted in admiration or love, but in advantage. People are drawn to light, not because they wish to become light themselves, but because it helps them see. In the same way, they are drawn to those who make life easier, smoother, or more successful. This is how usefulness quietly becomes a doorway through which many relationships enter. When someone is useful, they are rarely alone. They are consulted, included, remembered. Their phone rings, their messages are replied to quickly, and their absence is noticed. They are praised for their generosity, their strength, and their reliability. But beneath this appreciation often lies an unspoken expectation that they will continue to give, continue to support, continue to carry weight. The relationship, though friendly on the surface, is sustained by function rather than affection. Hardship disrupts this arrangement. Hardship has a way of stripping away appearances and exposing intention. When a person loses strength, faces failure, experiences illness, financial difficulty, emotional exhaustion, or simply says, "I cannot help right now," the dynamic shifts. The same people who once leaned in begin to lean away. Calls become less frequent. Concern becomes conditional, and presence becomes optional. Not because the person has changed, but because their usefulness has. This is where reality becomes clear. Hardship does not create distance, it reveals it. It shows who was attached to the person and who was attached to the benefit. It separates those who valued the individual from those who valued what the individual could provide. This realization can be deeply painful because it often comes at a moment when support is needed most. Yet it is also one of life's most honest lessons. Genuine people do not disappear when life becomes inconvenient. They may not have solutions, resources, or answers, but they offer something far more valuable: presence. They stay even when there is nothing to gain. They listen without expecting relief. They check in without being asked, and they give without keeping score. Their support may be quiet, but it is consistent. Hardship reveals them not through grand gestures, but through steady sincerity. Many people mistake enthusiasm for loyalty. When times are good, enthusiasm is easy. Laughter flows, encouragement is abundant, and promises are freely made. But loyalty is tested when there is nothing exciting to celebrate. It is tested in silence, in waiting rooms, in unanswered prayers, and in slow recoveries. Those who remain during these moments are not attached to usefulness. They are attached to the human being. Hardship also exposes our own expectations. Sometimes the pain we feel is not solely because people left, but because we assumed they would stay. We expected from them what they never promised to give. This does not excuse insincerity, but it invites reflection. Not everyone in our lives is meant to walk the difficult roads with us. Some are companions of ease, not companions of endurance. Recognizing this distinction helps reduce bitterness and replace it with understanding. There is wisdom in knowing that people have different capacities. Some lack the emotional strength to handle another person's pain. Others are overwhelmed by their own struggles and withdraw as a form of self-preservation. While their absence still hurts, understanding this prevents the heart from hardening. Hardship reveals genuineness, but it also reveals limitations. For the one experiencing hardship, this period can feel isolating. Yet it is also a purification. It clears the noise, thins the crowd, and leaves behind only what is real. The relationships that survive difficulty are often fewer, but they are deeper. They are not maintained by obligation or benefit, but by care. These connections do not demand energy, they provide it. Hardship also teaches a person not to build their identity around usefulness. When usefulness becomes the foundation of self-worth, losing it feels like losing value. But hardship challenges this belief. It forces a person to confront who they are without their roles, abilities, or contributions. And in that confrontation, there is an opportunity to rediscover intrinsic worth, the worth that exists even when hands are empty. Those who are genuine during hardship do not make you feel like a burden. They do not remind you of what you used to do, what you can no longer give. They meet you where you are, without comparison or pressure. Their presence communicates a powerful message. You are valued not because of what you offer, but because you exist. Over time, a person who has endured hardship becomes more discerning. They listen more closely, observe more carefully, and trust more slowly. This is not cynicism, it is wisdom earned through experience. They learn to appreciate usefulness as a gift, not a currency. They give when they can, not to secure loyalty, but because generosity is part of who they are. When ease returns, as it often does, the circle may grow again. Familiar faces may reappear and new ones may join. But the heart is no longer naive. It remembers who stood close when there was nothing to gain. It remembers who stayed when the light dimmed. And that memory becomes a guide, shaping future relationships with clarity and balance, allowing kindness without illusion and trust without blindness, understanding that usefulness may attract many, but hardship quietly reveals the genuine ones. Who matter most. Disappointment is not always betrayal. And understanding this distinction requires emotional maturity and honesty with oneself. Many times, when people fail to show up the way we hoped, the pain we feel is quickly labeled as betrayal. We assume intention, we assume disloyalty, and we assume that something was taken from us deliberately. But often, what we are experiencing is not betrayal at all, but the collapse of expectations we quietly built without fully realizing it. Betrayal involves a breach of trust, where loyalty was clearly promised and consciously broken. Disappointment, on the other hand, often arises when expectations were never agreed upon. We expected consistency where there was only convenience. We expected depth where there was only familiarity. We expected permanence where there was only temporary alignment. When these expectations fall apart, the emotional impact feels just as heavy, even if the cause is very different. Human beings have a tendency to fill silence with assumptions. When someone is present often, we assume they care deeply. When someone benefits from us repeatedly, we assume gratitude will translate into loyalty. When someone shares laughter and time with us, we assume they will share difficulty as well. These assumptions feel natural, but they are not guarantees. When reality contradicts them, disappointment follows, and because the pain is sharp, We search for someone to blame. It is easier to label someone a betrayer than to admit we misjudged the nature of the relationship. Betrayal places fault entirely outside of us, while disappointment invites self-reflection. It asks uncomfortable questions about why we expected more, why we ignored signs, and why we attached emotional weight to something that may not have been designed to carry it. This does not mean the other person is blameless, but it does mean the situation is more complex than simple wrongdoing. Many people give without clarity. They support, help, listen, and show up without expressing their needs or boundaries. Over time, they begin to expect the same level of care in return, even though it was never discussed. When that care does not come, the pain feels personal. Yet the other person may not even be aware that such an expectation existed. In this way, disappointment grows in the space between unspoken expectations and unmet emotional needs. There are also moments when people genuinely want to do better but lack the capacity. They may be overwhelmed, emotionally unavailable, struggling privately, or simply unaware of how much they are needed. Their failure to meet expectations is not rooted in malice, but in limitation. When we interpret every limitation as betrayal, we risk misreading human weakness as intentional harm. Disappointment can also come from idealizing people. We project qualities onto them that align with our needs rather than their reality. We see potential instead of patterns, intentions instead of actions. When the image we created collapses, the fall hurts more than the truth itself. In these moments, the pain is less about what the person did and more about what we believe they would be. This is why disappointment, while painful, can be a teacher. It exposes where we place unrealistic hope, where we ignored evidence, and where we gave more meaning than was earned. It encourages discernment rather than suspicion. Instead of closing the heart, it invites the mind to become clearer and the expectations to become more grounded. None of this invalidates the pain. Disappointment still hurts. It can feel like loss, rejection, or abandonment. But pain does not automatically define intent. Someone can disappoint you deeply without ever intending to harm you. Holding on to this distinction prevents the heart from becoming bitter and the mind from becoming unfair. And disappointment is mistaken for betrayal. Relationships often end with anger rather than understanding. Words are said that cannot be taken back. Bridges are burned that may not have needed to be destroyed. But when disappointment is recognized for what it is, space is created for perspective. One can step back and reassess the relationship honestly, without rewriting history or assigning motives that may not exist. Learning this distinction also reshapes how we place trust. Instead of assuming loyalty based on proximity or benefit, trust becomes something that is built slowly, through consistency across different circumstances. Expectations are adjusted to match demonstrated behavior rather than hope for potential. This does not make a person cold, it makes them wise. There is also humility in acknowledging that we too have disappointed others without intending betrayal. There are moments when we could not show up, could not give, could not stay, not because we did not care, but because we were limited. Remembering this softens judgment, replaces it with empathy. Disappointment, when processed honestly, refines emotional intelligence. It teaches where to draw lines, where to speak up, and where to release expectations. It helps a person separate who someone is from what they can give. Over time, this understanding leads to healthier connections where care is mutual, expectations are communicated, and trust is built on clarity rather than assumption. When disappointment is seen not as proof of betrayal but as information, it loses some of its poison. It becomes a signal rather than a sentence. A signal showing the true depth of a relationship, the true capacity of a person, and the true nature of our own expectations, allowing growth. Without resentment and awareness, without hostility, learning to carry the heart gently through human imperfection. Understanding that not every letdown is a wound inflicted by another, but sometimes the quiet sound of illusion giving way to truth. True worth is not measured by what you provide, but by who you are before your Creator. And this understanding reshapes the way a person sees themselves and the world around them. In a society that constantly asks, "What do you do?" before it asks, "Who are you?" it is easy to internalize the idea that value is earned through productivity, service, strength, or sacrifice. From an early age, people are praised when they perform well, when they help others, when they achieve, and when they give. Slowly, almost invisibly, worth becomes tied to usefulness. This way of measuring value is exhausting because it is never stable. What you provide today may not be needed tomorrow. Strength fades, resources fluctuate, energy runs low, and circumstances change. If worth is built on what is offered, then self-esteem rises and falls with ability. A person begins to feel valuable only when they are needed and invisible when they are not. This creates a fragile identity, constantly seeking reassurance through action rather than peace through understanding. Before the Creator, however, worth is not transactional. It is not dependent on output or performance. It is rooted in existence itself. A person is valuable not because of how much they give, but because they were intentionally created, known, and sustained. This truth challenges the deepest insecurities because it removes comparison from the equation. One person's success does not diminish another's worth, and one person's struggle does not make them less significant. When someone believes their value lies only in what they provide, they overextend themselves. They give beyond their limits, tolerate disrespect, and remain in unhealthy dynamics because being needed feels safer than being alone. They fear rest because rest feels like uselessness. They fear saying no because no threatens their place in people's lives. Over time, this leads to burnout, resentment, and quiet despair, all rooted in a misunderstanding of worth. Recognizing that worth comes from who you are before your Creator introduces a different kind of strength. It allows a person to rest without guilt, to withdraw without shame, and to say no without fear of disappearance. It reminds them that even in silence, even in weakness, even in moments of failure, they are still seen, still known, and still valued. This awareness anchors the heart when external validation disappears. This perspective also frees relationships from hidden pressure. When you no longer need to earn your worth through service, you stop giving to secure love. You give because generosity reflects your values, not because you are afraid of being forgotten. You help without keeping score and step back without guilt. Relationships become healthier because they are no longer built on emotional bargaining. There is a deep comfort in knowing that worth is constant even when contribution is not. Illness, loss, aging, and hardship no longer feel like personal failures, but like seasons that do not redefine identity. A person may not be able to do what they once did, but who they are remains intact. This realization is especially important in moments when usefulness is stripped away because it prevents the heart from collapsing along with circumstances. Before the Creator, intention often carries more weight than outcome. Effort matters even when results fall short. Sincerity matters even when recognition is absent. Struggle matters even when success is delayed. This understanding shifts focus from public approval to inner alignment. A person begins to ask not how valuable am I to people, but am I living with integrity, humility, and awareness. This does not mean action is unimportant. Contribution has meaning, service has reward, and effort has purpose. But they are expressions of worth, not the source of it. When action flows from identity rather than identity depending on action, balance is restored. A person can strive without desperation and serve without self-erasure. Understanding worth in this way also softens the heart toward others. When you stop ranking yourself by usefulness, you stop ranking others the same way. You become more patient with those who cannot give much, more compassionate toward those who are struggling, and less impressed by those who only shine through performance. You begin to see people as souls, not resources. There is also protection in this belief. When people walk away because you can no longer provide, It hurts, but it does not destroy you. Their departure does not rewrite your value. It simply reveals the nature of the connection. Your sense of self remains intact because it was never built on their approval in the first place. Many people only discover this truth after loss, when careers pause, health declines, roles change, or relationships end. The question arises, who am I now? Those who tied their worth to usefulness struggle deeply in these moments. Those who anchored their worth in their relationship with the Creator grieve, but they do not collapse. They hurt, but they do not lose themselves. Living with this understanding does not make a person passive or detached. It makes them grounded. They still strive, still give, still care, but they do so from fullness rather than fear. Their worth no longer needs constant reinforcement from people, because it is already established in something greater and more stable than human opinion. Over time, this belief reshapes priorities. Approval becomes less important than sincerity. Being seen becomes less important than being true. And usefulness becomes something you offer, not something you owe. Walking through life with a quieter heart and steadier footing, knowing that even when hands are empty and voices are silent, worth remains untouched, rooted in being known beyond performance, held beyond productivity, and honored beyond what the world can measure. Awareness of this reality brings peace, not bitterness, when guided by wisdom and faith. And this distinction is essential, because awareness alone can either heal or harden the heart. When a person first realizes that many relationships are conditional, the immediate reaction is often pain. There is a sense of disillusionment, as though something pure has been taken away. Trust feels shaken, memories are questioned, and the heart may feel tempted to withdraw from everyone as a form of self-protection. Without guidance, this awareness can easily turn into cynicism. Bitterness grows when awareness is paired with ego or unresolved hurt. A person begins to replay experiences repeatedly, collecting evidence of disloyalty, and interpreting every absence as proof of insincerity. They may speak harshly about people, build emotional walls, and pride themselves on no longer needing anyone. What they call strength is often unprocessed grief. This kind of awareness does not bring peace. It breeds isolation and quiet anger. Wisdom changes the direction of awareness. Wisdom recognizes patterns without demonizing people. It understands that human beings are flawed, limited, and often unaware of their own motivations. Instead of asking, why are people like this? Wisdom asks, what is this teaching me? This shift transforms awareness from a weapon into a tool. Rather than being used to judge others, it is used to refine expectations and deepen discernment. Faith anchors this wisdom. Faith reminds the heart that human inconsistency does not negate divine constancy. While people come and go, support fluctuates, and loyalty wavers, there's a presence that does not leave. This awareness prevents the heart from demanding from people what only the Creator can provide. When faith is strong, disappointment in people does not lead to despair, because reliance was never placed entirely on them. With faith, awareness becomes liberating. A person no longer chases validation or clings to those who withdraw. They understand that loss of connection is sometimes protection, not punishment. They accept that some people were part of a chapter, not the entire story. This acceptance reduces emotional struggle because the heart stops fighting reality and starts flowing with it. Peace comes from aligning expectations with truth. When you expect people to be human rather than ideal, their limitations no longer shock you. You appreciate kindness without demanding permanence. You welcome companionship without assuming commitment. This does not make relationships shallow, it makes them honest. Peace grows where expectations are realistic. Awareness, guided by wisdom, also encourages gratitude. Instead of focusing on those who left, attention shifts to those who stayed. Instead of counting losses, the heart counts blessings. Even one sincere connection outweighs many conditional ones. This perspective nurtures contentment rather than resentment. There is also peace in knowing when to step back without hostility. Awareness teaches that withdrawal does not always require confrontation. Not every. Distance needs an explanation, and not every disappointment needs closure. Sometimes, the most dignified response is quiet acceptance. This restraint preserves inner calm and protects emotional energy. Faith further deepens this peace by reframing justice. Instead of seeking validation through being understood or defended by others, a person entrusts their story to a higher understanding. They let go of the need to explain themselves or prove their worth. This release lifts a heavy burden from the heart. When awareness matures, compassion increases. A person becomes less reactive and more reflective. They recognize that people who attach themselves conditionally often do so out of insecurity or fear. This understanding does not excuse harmful behavior, but it prevents hatred. Compassion softens the heart without compromising boundaries. Peace also comes from self-honesty. Awareness reveals where one may have overgiven, ignored signs, or avoided setting limits. Instead of self-blame, wisdom invites learning. Each experience becomes guidance for future choices. Growth replaces regret. With faith, even loneliness takes on meaning. Solitude is no longer seen as abandonment, but as space for renewal. Quiet moments become opportunities for reflection and strengthening inner connection. The heart learns to be still without feeling empty. Awareness guided by wisdom and faith does not isolate a person. It refines their circle. It reduces noise while increasing depth. Relationships become fewer but richer, lighter but more sincere. Trust becomes intentional, not automatic. Ultimately, peace arises when a person stops resisting the truth about human nature and stops demanding perfection from imperfect beings. They walk through life with open eyes and a guarded heart, gentle but firm, kind but discerning. This balance allows joy without illusion and trust without naivety, moving forward with clarity rather than fear, strength rather than bitterness, and calm acceptance rather than constant emotional struggle, understanding that awareness was never meant to harden the soul, but to free it into a quieter, steadier way of being.